The year was 2347, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Concord for exactly 100 years. They were tolerated but never respected. The older species looked at humans and saw weak creatures with short lives. They saw a species that had spent most of its history fighting itself. They saw a planet that was once divided into hundreds of small nations that could not agree on anything. Captain stood on the bridge of her ship, the horizon's edge, watching the stars pass by through the main window. She was 34 years old, with short black hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. Her crew of 47 worked quietly around her, running their routine patrol near the edge of known space. "Captain," her communications officer said, "we are receiving an emergency signal. It is coming from Concord Central Command." Walked to the communications station and looked at the message. Her face went pale as she read the words on the screen. The Dominion had declared war on the entire Galactic Concord. They were giving everyone 30 days to surrender. If the Concord refused, the promised total destruction. There were the nightmare that parents told their children about on 1,000 different worlds. They were conquerors. They had destroyed 17 civilizations in the last 10,000 years. Their fleet numbered in the millions. No one had ever stopped them. Ordered her ship to turn back toward Axis Prime, the great space station where the Concord's High Council met. Every species in the galaxy would be sending representatives. This was the moment that would decide if the galaxy lived or died. 3 days later, stood in the observation balcony above the council chamber. The room was enormous, built to hold representatives from 42 different species. She had never seen so many aliens in one place. They clicked and buzzed in one corner, their hard shells reflecting the lights. They floated in special water tanks, their fluid bodies constantly shifting and changing shape. They stood like living statues made of crystal, light passing through their transparent forms. And they were all arguing. "This is your fault," the High Commander shouted at the delegation. "Your people provoked with your expansion into the Rim territories." "Our fault," the High Speaker replied, his voice bubbling through a translator. "They were the ones who insulted the Emperor 3 centuries ago. They started this." "We did nothing wrong," a representative chimed, her crystal body ringing like a bell. "They are simply evil. They need no reason to attack." Shook her head and turned to the man standing beside her. Admiral was old, perhaps 70 years by Earth counting. His face was covered in scars, and his left eye was artificial, a gift from the last Earth War. That war had been fought 60 years ago, when humanity finally united under one government. Had been a young soldier then. Now he was the highest military commander that Earth had. "They are going to destroy themselves before they even arrive," said quietly. Nodded slowly. His artificial eye glowed faintly in the dim light of the balcony. "They have never had a reason to truly unite. They have never been pushed to the very edge of death. And we have." The old admiral was quiet for a moment. Below them, the arguing continued. A representative from a species did not recognize was now accusing 3 other species of secret dealings with the "Every generation," finally said. "Every century. Humans have always found ways to nearly destroy themselves, and every time at the last moment we found ways to survive. It is perhaps the only thing we are truly good at." The council session continued for 6 more hours. Nothing was decided. 3 species announced that they were leaving the Concord entirely. They would try to make their own deals with the 7 other species declared themselves neutral. They would not fight, but they would not surrender either. They would simply hide and hope. The remaining 32 species could not agree on anything. Who would command the combined fleet? How would resources be shared? Which systems would be defended first? Every question led to more arguments, more old hatreds coming to the surface. Returned to her ship that night feeling hopeless. She lay in her small cabin, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Earth. She had not been home in 3 years. Her parents lived in a small town near the mountains of what used to be called Korea. They were probably sleeping now, not knowing that their daughter was watching the galaxy fall apart. The next morning the news came. The advance fleet had reached they had a defense force of 10,000 ships, the brought 200,000. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, there was burning. 4 billion beings made of living crystal were dead. An entire civilization, one of the oldest in the galaxy, had been reduced to ash and melted glass. Watched the footage in the ship's meeting room with her crew. No one spoke. On the screen, cities that had stood for 1,000,000 years collapsed into fire. The planet's crystal seas boiled away into nothing. The ships moved on without stopping, leaving nothing but death behind them. They did not even try to conquer them, her first officer whispered. They just killed everyone. Why? To send a message, answered. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. They want us to know that surrender or death are the only choices. They want us afraid. Back on Axis Prime, the council met again. This time, there were empty seats where the representatives used to sit. The few who survived were scattered across the galaxy now, refugees with no home to return to. The arguing continued, but it was quieter now. Fear had replaced anger. Watched from the balcony again, standing beside Admiral. Something has to change, she said. Someone has to do something, or we are all going to die like the. Was quiet for a long time. His face showed no emotion, but his hands gripped the railing tightly. I have been speaking with Ambassador, he finally said. She has an idea. It is crazy. It will probably fail, but it is the only chance we have. What idea? The old admiral turned to look at her. For the first time since she had known him, saw something like hope in his eyes. We are going to show them what humans really are, he said. We are going to show them what a species that has survived 10,000 years of trying to kill itself can do when it decides to fight for something other than itself. Will they listen? Probably not at first, but after the kill a few more billion of them, they might change their minds. He paused and looked down at the arguing council below. Fear is a powerful teacher, and right now the galaxy is very, very afraid. Looked at the alien delegates below, still blaming each other, still unable to see past their ancient hatreds. She thought about the 4 billion who had died. She thought about her parents sleeping peacefully in their small town on Earth. Then let us teach them, she said, before it is too late. Nodded slowly. The stars outside the station windows seemed cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the fleet was moving closer. They had 27 days left before the end of everything. And humanity was about to make the most important speech in galactic history. The human delegation requested an emergency assembly. This had never happened before in the history of the galactic conquered. Humans were considered a young species, barely worth listening to. They had only been traveling among the stars for 300 years. Some of the species in the council had been building empires when humans were still living in caves. But the council agreed to hear them. There was nothing else to do. They were coming, and no one had any answers. Ambassador walked to the center of the great council chamber. She was a small woman, 52 years old, with gray hair and calm eyes. Before she became a diplomat, she had been a soldier. She had fought in 3 border conflicts and lost her right arm in the Battle of Titan Station. The arm she had now was mechanical, covered in synthetic skin that almost looked real. The alien delegates barely paid attention as she took her position. They were still buzzing among themselves. They were floating lazily in their tanks. Only a few survivors watched with interest, their crystal bodies dim with grief. Waited until the room was quiet, then she spoke. You are all going to die. The chamber went silent. Every eye, every sensor, every alien organ that served as an eye turned toward the small human woman in the center of the room. Not because they are strong, she continued, her voice steady and clear. They are strong, yes. Their fleet is larger than anything we can build. Their weapons are powerful. Their soldiers are fearless. but these things alone will not kill you. She paused and looked around the room. You will die because you have never learned what my people learned through 10,000 years of bleeding. She touched a control on her mechanical arm and a holographic display appeared above her. Images began to play: human history, wars that killed millions, famines that starved entire continents, plagues that wiped out half the population of Earth, nuclear explosions turning cities into glass, armies marching across burning fields, bodies piled in mass graves. The alien delegates reacted with horror. Some turned away, others stared with fascination and disgust. "This is what we are," said. "This is what we were. We killed each other for centuries. We burned our own world. We stood at the edge of extinction not once, not twice, but 7 times, and every single time it was by our own hands." The images continued. The Great Famine of 2089, the Resource Wars of the 22nd century, the last Earth War where humanity finally united, but only after 2 billion people died. "We are not wise," said. "We are not peaceful. We are not enlightened. We are violent and afraid and full of hate. Every species in this room has looked at humanity and seen these things. You have called us primitive. You have called us dangerous. You have kept us at the edge of the conquered, never trusting us with real power or real responsibility." She turned off the display. The horrible images disappeared, leaving only the small woman standing alone in the center of the chamber. "You were right to be cautious, but you were wrong about one thing." She walked slowly around the chamber, looking at each delegation in turn. "Every time we stood at the edge of death, we chose to survive. Not because we stopped hating each other, not because we suddenly became good or kind or wise. We survived because when the knife is at your throat, nothing matters except the hand reaching out beside you. When you are about to die, you do not care about old arguments or ancient hatreds. You care only about living one more day." She stopped in front of the delegation. The high speaker floated closer to the glass of his tank, his fluid body rippling with attention. "You think unity is impossible," said. "You think cooperation requires shared blood, shared history, shared biology. You think that different species can never truly fight as one." She smiled, but there was no happiness in it. "My people thought the same thing. For thousands of years, humans believed that peace was impossible. We believed that war was natural, that competition was the only way to survive. We believed that anyone different from us was an enemy." She raised her mechanical arm. "I lost this arm fighting other humans. I killed people who looked exactly like me, who spoke my language, who prayed to the same gods. I did this because I believed there was no other way." She lowered her arm. "I was wrong. We were all wrong. And 60 years ago, humanity finally learned the truth. Unity does not require agreement. It does not require love or trust or understanding. Unity requires only one thing: the choice to stand beside someone different from yourself when death is coming for you both." She returned to the center of the chamber and presented the human proposal: a unified command structure with human tactical coordination. All fleets combined into one force, regardless of species. All resources shared without reservation. No more separate territories, no more individual strategies. One army, one fleet, one conquered. The high speaker rose from his tank, his translator bubbling. "You ask us to trust humans with command. Your species has been spacefaring for merely 3 centuries. We have been sailing the stars for 8,000 years. Admiral stepped forward from the human delegation. His face was hard, his artificial eye glowing. "We do not ask for trust," he said. "We ask for survival. Trust can come later if there is a later." The vote was held that same day. The human proposal failed by 6 votes. The voted against it. So did the and several smaller species. Ancient rivalries and old fears were too strong. Returned to the human section of Axis Prime feeling defeated. She sat in her small room, staring at the wall, thinking about the 4 billion who had died, thinking about the billions more who would die when they arrived. That night they struck again. They attacked the breeding colonies in the outer rim. They did not keep their eggs on there. They spread them across dozens of colony stations, protecting the future of their species. They knew this. They targeted every colony at the same time. 80 million eggs were destroyed in one night. 3 generations of children, gone before they were born. The High Commander came to the human delegation the next morning. He was enormous, covered in hard black shell, with 6 legs and 4 arms. His species did not cry, but something in the way he moved showed grief beyond words. "We change our vote," he said. His translator made his voice flat and mechanical but could hear the pain underneath. "We will follow your command. We will do whatever you say. Just help us kill them. Help us make them pay." Stood up and looked at the alien creature before her. He was nothing like her. His body, his mind, his way of thinking were completely foreign, but in his eyes she saw something she recognized perfectly. Loss, rage, the desperate need to protect what remained. She held out her mechanical hand. The High Commander looked at it for a moment, then reached out with one of his 4 arms and took it. "We will make them pay," he said, "together." The conquered voted again the next day. This time, the human proposal passed. 22 days remained before they arrived. And humanity had just become responsible for saving the galaxy. 22 days remained. It was not enough time. Everyone knew it was not enough time, but it was all they had. Humanity called it Project Convergence. Across 100 star systems, human engineers and soldiers and diplomats began working alongside aliens who had never cooperated in recorded history. Ships that had been enemies for centuries were now docking together. Crews that had been taught to hate each other were now sharing meals and training sessions. Lieutenant was assigned to the most impossible task of all. He had to make targeting systems work with communication arrays. These 2 technologies had never been combined before. Most engineers said it could not be done. They used water-based computers that thought in flowing patterns. They used crystal networks that processed information through light. They were as different as fire and ice. Was 26 years old, born on a colony ship traveling between Earth and Mars. He had spent his whole life around technology, taking things apart and putting them back together. His parents said he could fix anything. But this challenge was different. This was not just about machines. This was about making 2 species work together who had never worked together before. His partner was named Prism. She was a young crystal being, only 200 years old by her species count. She had lost her entire family when they destroyed the. Now she worked in silence, her crystal body dim and cold, rarely speaking unless necessary. The technician was called in the human translation. He was an expert in fluid computing, one of the best in his species. He was also proud and difficult. He considered both humans and to be inferior creatures, too slow and too solid to understand true intelligence. "Your biology is incompatible with efficiency," told on the first day. "You require sleep. You require solid food. You leak heat constantly. How can such a wasteful creature contribute anything useful?" Did not argue. He simply started working. He worked for 19 hours without stopping, writing code and testing connections and rebuilding interfaces. When his body finally gave out, he slept for 3 hours on the floor of the engineering bay. Then he woke up and started working again. On the 4th day, the integration succeeded. Targeting systems could now communicate perfectly with arrays. Data flowed between them like water through crystal, combining the best of both technologies. Floated in his tank, watching the human with new eyes. "You damage yourself to complete tasks," he said. "Your body is failing. Your efficiency is decreasing with every hour, yet you continue." Looked up from his workstation. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. His hands were shaking slightly, but he smiled. We call it dedication, he said. We call it insanity. Sometimes they are the same thing. Prism's crystal body flickered with faint light. It was the first sign of emotion she had shown since her world died. I think I understand now, she said quietly. Your species does not survive because you are strong or smart. You survive because you refuse to stop. Similar scenes were happening across the entire conquered fleet. Human officers were learning to command crews of 17 different species. Human pilots were training alongside beings who saw the universe in completely different ways. The saw through compound eyes that detected heat patterns. The sensed electrical fields through their fluid bodies. The surviving perceived everything as patterns of light and vibration. Human soldiers learned to fight next to aliens who moved and thought nothing like them. Human medics studied alien biology in days when it should have taken years. They made mistakes. They failed. They tried again. Doctor was the chief medical officer of the combined fleet. She was 60 years old, with gentle hands and a quiet voice. She had been a doctor for 40 years, treating every injury and illness that humans could suffer. Now she had to learn how to treat 42 different species, each with their own biology, their own medicines, their own ways of dying. That brought her their greatest challenge. The Hive commander, one of the most important military leaders of their species, had been injured in the attack on the breeding colonies. A piece of weapon was lodged near his central nerve cluster. Doctors could not remove it. The wound was in a place that their claws could not reach. But human hands were smaller. Human fingers were more precise. "You want me to operate on him?" asked when they brought the massive to her medical bay. "No outsider has ever touched a commander," the representative said. "It is forbidden. It is shameful, but he will die without help, and we cannot lose him, not now." Looked at the alien creature on the operating table. He was huge, covered in hard black shell, completely unlike anything human. But underneath the shell, he was a living being in pain. He was someone's friend, someone's leader, someone's family. "I will save him," she said. The operation took 7 hours, worked with tools designed for human surgery, adapting them for alien anatomy as she went. 3 times she thought she had failed. 3 times she found another way forward. When she finally removed the piece of weapon, the medical staff made a sound she had never heard before. Later, she learned it was their way of crying with relief. The Hive commander recovered. When he woke, he asked to see the human who had saved his life. "You touched my shell," he said through his translator. "This has never been allowed, but you did it to save me." "I did what any doctor would do," replied. "No, you did what no doctor has ever done. You reached across the divide between our species. You saw past the shell to the creature beneath." He paused and made a clicking sound. "I give you my true name. Among my people, this is the highest honor. Only family knows our true names. Now you are family." He told her his name. It was a series of clicks and buzzes that she could not pronounce, but she remembered it. She would remember it for the rest of her life. Captain coordinated everything from the command carrier Unity. She had not slept more than 2 hours at a time in 18 days. Her crew was a mixture of 6 different species now, humans and others. They watched her push herself beyond every limit. "Why do you do this?" her first officer asked. His name was Facet, and he had been assigned to her ship after the destruction of his. "Your body is failing. Your thinking is becoming slower. This is not efficient." Looked at him with tired eyes. "Because if I stop, someone else has to carry more weight, and everyone is already carrying everything they can." Facet processed this information. His crystal body hummed softly as he thought. "You distribute suffering equally," he said. "You take pain upon yourself so others do not have to bear it alone." "We try to." "This is not logical." "No," agreed, "but it is human." The days passed. The fleet grew stronger. Species that had never worked together began to understand each other, not perfectly, not completely, but enough. enough to fight side by side, enough to die together if necessary. Admiral walked through the fleet on the last day before the battle. He visited every ship, spoke to every crew. Human and alien alike, they looked at the old man with something like hope. "Tomorrow we fight," he told them. "Many of us will die, but we will die together, and that is something they have never faced before. They have conquered species that fought alone. They have destroyed civilizations that could not unite, but they have never in all their history faced a galaxy that chose to stand as one." He paused and looked at the mixed crews around him. "Tomorrow we show them what that means." The stars outside the ship windows seemed brighter somehow, as if the universe itself was watching, waiting to see what would happen when beings who had been strangers chose to become something more. Something the galaxy had never seen before. The fleet came out of hyperspace at Terminus Gate. This was the last defensive position before the Conquered's core worlds. If the gate fell, everything fell. Every colony, every space station would be open to attack. They brought 12 million warships. They filled the sky like a black cloud, blocking out the stars. Their vessels were massive, covered in weapons, built for one purpose only: destruction. At the center of the fleet was the command ship of Supreme Hierarch, the leader of all forces. He had never lost a battle. He had destroyed 17 civilizations. He expected this war to be no different. The conquered fleet was waiting for them. 1.4 million vessels. They were outnumbered nearly 10 to 1. By every normal measure, they should have no chance at all. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dawn of Unity. Around him, his crew worked in silence. Humans sat next to water tanks. Officers clicked and buzzed at their stations. Navigators glowed softly as they processed incoming data. It was strange and beautiful and impossible. Opened a channel to all forces. His voice carried across 10,000 frequencies, translated into 42 languages. "Today we are not or human. Today we are the conquered. Today we are one." He paused, letting the words reach every ship, every soldier, every being who was about to fight. They believe that unity is impossible. They believe that cooperation is weakness. They believe that we will break apart under pressure, just as every other civilization has broken before them. He looked at the endless field of enemy ships on the main display. "They are about to learn what my people learned long ago. Nothing in this universe is more dangerous than beings who have decided to stand together." He raised his hand. "All ships engage." The battle began. The first wave of attackers crashed into the conquered defensive line. Energy weapons lit up the darkness of space. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. In the first minute, 1,000 vessels were destroyed on both sides. Captain commanded the 7th Combined Strike Group from her position in the center of the formation. Her group was a mixture of fast human cruisers, heavily armored carriers, and assault ships that moved like living water through the battlefield. "All ships follow my lead," she ordered. "We are going into the center of their formation. Find the weak points, hit them hard, move fast." "Captain, the center is their strongest position," one of her captains said through the communication channel. "We will take heavy losses." "I know, but if we break their center, their flanks will collapse. Trust me, trust each other." The 7th Strike Group dove into the heart of the formation. Ship was hit within the first hour. An energy beam tore through the hull, killing a dozen crew members and destroying the main engine. "Abandon ship," she ordered. Then she transferred her flag to a nearby vessel, taking command from its captain without stopping to rest. The ship was strange and alien. The controls were designed for fluid beings, not solid ones. The air was thick and humid, but adapted. She had to. There was no time for anything else. "Continue the attack," she commanded. "We do not stop until they break." Lieutenant was in the weapons center of a carrier, watching his integrated targeting system perform beyond all expectations. Gunners fired enhanced weapons with perfect timing. Crystal communication arrays coordinated attacks across dozens of ships at once. Things that had never been possible before were now happening. Direct hit on command cruiser, a gunner reported. Shields down, they are falling back. Do not let them retreat, said. All ships focus fire on the damaged vessel. 12 ships from 3 different species concentrated their weapons on the cruiser. It exploded in a flash of light that was visible across the entire battlefield. On the command ship, Supreme Hierarch watched the battle with growing confusion. This was not how his enemies were supposed to fight. Every other civilization he had conquered had fallen apart under pressure. Old hatreds had always surfaced. Allies had always betrayed each other when death came close. But these enemies were different. They fought as one organism. When a human ship was damaged, fighters moved to protect it. When a vessel lost power, rescue ships appeared within minutes. When an attack failed, they did not blame each other. They simply regrouped and tried again. Report, demanded. His voice was cold and hard, like metal grinding against metal. They fight without self-preservation, his tactical officer said. Human vessels are using themselves as shields to protect Allied ships. Pilots are ramming our carriers when their weapons run empty. They are sharing their life fluid with wounded, keeping them alive long enough to continue fighting. That is impossible, said. No species sacrifices itself for another. It goes against every law of nature. These species do, Supreme Hierarch. I do not understand it, but they do. The battle continued for 19 hours. The conquered lost 600,000 ships. The lost 3.2 million. It was a ratio that should have been impossible. Doctor worked in the medical bay of a hospital ship, treating wounded from every species. Her hands were covered in blood of 6 different colors. Ichor, fluid, human red, crystal fragments that cut her fingers as she worked to save their shattered bodies. The hive commander, the one whose life she had saved weeks ago, was brought to her table. He had been leading a desperate attack against a weapons platform. His ship had been destroyed, but he had succeeded in taking the platform with him. Doctor, he whispered through his translator. His voice was faint, his shell cracked in a dozen places. Did we win? Not yet, said, working frantically to stop the bleeding. But we are still fighting. Good, his compound eyes flickered. I am glad. I am glad I could fight beside you, beside all of you. It was an honor. Do not talk like that. You are going to survive. No, he reached out with one broken arm and touched her hand. But you will. You will survive, all of you together. That is what matters. He died holding her hand, closed his eyes and took a moment to whisper his true name, the name he had given her as family. Then she turned to the next patient. There was no time for grief. Not yet. Admiral's flagship was destroyed in the 15th hour of the battle. A dreadnought caught the dawn of unity in a crossfire, tearing it apart piece by piece. Evacuated his crew and transferred to an escape pod, but he continued coordinating the battle from there. His oxygen supply was running low. His communications equipment was failing, but he kept giving orders until the last possible moment. A rescue ship found his pod with seconds to spare. When they brought him aboard, his first words were, "Status of the fleet." "We hold, Admiral," the captain said through her translator. Her fluid body rippled with exhaustion and pain. She had been fighting for 19 hours without rest. "We hold." Closed his eyes and allowed himself one small moment of relief. Then the fleet began to retreat. For the first time in their 8,000-year history of conquest, the Dominion was withdrawing from a battle. They had lost half their ships. They had lost their myth of invincibility. They had lost something they could never get back, the certainty that they could not be stopped. Supreme Hierarch sent one final transmission before his fleet jumped to hyperspace. "What are you?" he demanded. "What have you become?" Ambassador responded on behalf of the entire conquered fleet. Her voice was tired but steady, carried across the battlefield to every surviving ship. "We are what you made us," she said. "We are what you forced us to become. We are together." The fleet disappeared into hyperspace. The battle was over. The survivors floated among the wreckage of millions of ships, surrounded by the bodies of the dead from 42 species. They had won. They had actually won. Captain stood on the bridge of her fourth ship of the battle, a damaged cruiser that was barely holding together. Her body ached. Her mind was numb, but she was alive. They were all alive. Well, not all of them. So many had died, so many would never go home. But the galaxy was still here, and it would never be the same again. They were gone. For the first time in 8,000 years of conquest, they had run away from a fight. Their great fleet, once 12 million ships strong, had been cut in half. Their supreme hierarch had fled back to space, his reputation destroyed forever. But the cost of victory was terrible. 600,000 conquered ships had been destroyed at Terminus Gate. Billions of beings from 42 species had died. The wreckage field stretched across an entire star system, a graveyard of metal and crystal and flesh floating in the darkness of space. Admiral recovered slowly on a medical station near the battlefield. His body was broken in many places. His artificial eye had been damaged and had to be replaced. But he was alive, and so were enough of his people to rebuild. Captain came to visit him 3 days after the battle. She had been given a new rank now, Admiral. She was the youngest human to ever hold the position. She did not feel proud. She felt tired and sad and old. "How are you feeling?" she asked, sitting beside his bed. "Like someone dropped a building on me," said. His voice was weak, but there was a hint of humor in it. "But I have felt worse. The last Earth war was harder than this." "Really?" "No," he laughed softly, then coughed. "I lied. This was worse, much worse, but we are still here. That is what matters." They sat in silence for a moment, looking out the window at the stars. "What happens now?" asked. "Now we rebuild. Now we mourn. Now we make sure this never happens again." Turned his head to look at her. "They will not stay beaten forever. They will come back someday, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 100, but they will come back. We need to be ready." "How do we do that?" "By staying together, by not forgetting what we learned, by being more than we were before." The Galactic Concord met again on Axis Prime 1 month after the battle. The chamber looked different now. The species that had withdrawn before the war had returned, ashamed and quiet. The species that had declared neutrality had nothing to say. Everyone understood now what had almost happened. What would have happened without human leadership? The High Commander stood before the assembly. He was a new commander, chosen after the old one died at Terminus Gate. He spoke slowly, his translator making his words clear for everyone. "We spent 10,000 years believing that unity among different species was impossible. We believed that cooperation required shared blood, shared history, shared ways of thinking. We believed that strangers could never truly fight as one." He paused and looked at the human delegation. "We were wrong. The humans showed us something we had never seen before. They showed us that unity does not come from being the same. It comes from choosing to stand beside someone who is different. It comes from deciding that survival together is worth more than pride alone." The High Speaker rose from his water tank. His fluid body glowed with strong colors, a sign of deep emotion. "I was one of those who voted against the human proposal," he said. "I did not trust them. I did not believe that a species so young and so violent could teach us anything. I was foolish and proud and nearly destroyed us all." He turned to face the human delegates. "I apologize. On behalf of my people, I apologize. You saved us when we did not deserve to be saved." Ambassador stood to respond. Her mechanical arm gleamed in the light of the chamber. She looked around at the assembled species, aliens who had been strangers and enemies, who were now something else entirely. "We did not save you," she said. "We saved each other. No single species won this war. The died protecting human ships. They shared their life essence with survivors. Human medics operated on commanders. Navigators guided human pilots through impossible battles. We all sacrificed. We all suffered. We all won together. She paused. They were right about one thing. Alone, we are weak. Alone, each of our species would have fallen. But together, we are something the universe has never seen before. Together, we are unbeatable. The Galactic Concord was reformed that day. They called it the Unified Concord now. Human tactical doctrine became standard for all military forces. Human concepts of solidarity and sacrifice were studied by every species. A new era had begun. Doctor returned to her work in the medical corps. She trained new doctors from every species, teaching them how to treat patients regardless of biology. Her students learned to see past shells and scales and crystal bodies to the living beings underneath. The Hive commander's true name was inscribed on a memorial in her medical bay. She never forgot it. Lieutenant became one of the most famous engineers in the Concord. His integrated targeting systems were installed on every warship. Species that had never worked together now collaborated on technology that would have been impossible before the war. The technician who had once called humans inefficient became his closest friend and partner. Prism, the young who had lost everything when her world burned, found a new purpose. She worked with human architects to design a memorial on the rebuilt. It was a monument to everyone who had died at Terminus Gate, regardless of species. Crystal spires rose toward the sky, each one containing the names of the fallen. 1 year after the battle, Doctor visited the memorial. She walked among the crystal spires, touching them gently, feeling them respond to her presence. She found one spire near the center of the memorial. It glowed softly as she approached, recognizing her from the medical records stored in its crystal structure. Inside was the name of the Hive commander, the one who had given her his true name, the one who had died holding her hand. Below his name, carved in 42 languages, was an inscription. We were strangers, we became family, we chose each other. Stood there for a long time, tears running down her face. Around her, beings from a dozen species moved among the memorial, mourning their own lost ones. A father floated beside the spire of his child. A human soldier knelt before the names of his comrades. A mother touched the crystal that held her mate's memory. They were all different. Different bodies, different minds, different ways of living and dying. But in this moment, standing among the monuments to their shared sacrifice, they were one. Far across the galaxy, in dark spaces between the stars, other civilizations watched. Some were older than the Conquered. Some were more powerful. Some had been waiting to see what would happen when they attacked. They had expected the Conquered to fall. They had expected the usual pattern: division, betrayal, collapse. That was how civilizations always ended. That was how the universe worked. But the Conquered had not fallen. The humans had done something that should have been impossible. They had united species that had been enemies for. They had shown that the basic rules of survival, the laws that said cooperation was impossible between different beings, could be broken. These ancient civilizations looked at the unified Conquered with new eyes. Some felt fear. Some felt hope. All of them understood that something had changed. The humans had proven that evolution's drive toward competition and dominance could be overcome. They had shown that the universe did not belong to the strongest or the most advanced. It belonged to those who chose to stand together. Admiral stood on the observation deck of her new flagship, looking out at the stars. Behind her, her crew worked in perfect harmony. Humans and a dozen other species, all serving together, all protecting each other. "The will come back someday," Facet said, standing beside her. The officer had stayed with her through everything. He was no longer just her first officer. He was her friend. "Yes, they will," agreed. "But we will be ready, we will be stronger, and we will still be together." "Do you really believe that?" Smiled. It was a tired smile, marked by everything she had seen and lost and survived. But it was real. "I know it," she said, "because we chose this. We chose each other, and that choice once made cannot be undone." She looked out at the stars, at the infinite darkness filled with infinite light. The galaxy was afraid of what they would do. Now they should be afraid of what we have become. Facet's crystal body rang softly, the equivalent of a laugh. "They should indeed," he said. "They should indeed." Above them the stars shone on, no longer cold, no longer indifferent. The universe had seen something new, something that changed everything. It had seen true unity. And it would never forget.